I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 10 movies that were only made with very weirdly specific conditions.
Film and TV is cool, but you know what else is cool? Protecting your privacy online. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description and get up to 76% off a 2-year NordVPN plan, plus 4 months free and up to a $50 Amazon gift card if you sign up today. I'd make that deal. Damn good deal.
Number 10. It had to feature a giant mechanical spider. Wild Wild West. Wild Wild West sure was, well, let's face it, a disappointment. But who among us in the 2+ decades since has ever forgotten about the huge 80-foot mechanical spider that villain Dr. Loveless trots out as his ultimate weapon? The film was co-produced by director Barry Sonnenfeld and eccentric mega-producer John Peters, with Peters being the one that came up with the ludicrous idea to feature a gigantic metal tarantula. But there's even more to the story here. As Kevin Smith explained in his live show An Evening with Kevin Smith, Peters actually recycled the spider concept from Superman Lives, a cancelled Superman reboot that he was attempting to get made throughout the 1990s. Superman Lives was set to star Nicolas Cage, with Tim Burton directing and Smith penning the script. Peters insisted to Smith that the third act climax was the Man of Steel fighting against a giant spider, but when the film never came together, Peters held on to that idea and imposed it upon the Wild Wild West crew with a mechanical steampunk facelift. Now, in Peters' mild defense, the CGI mecha spider still looks pretty great from a visual effects perspective, but the rest of the movie, not so much. Number 9. Every single bubble had to be hand-drawn. The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid is one of Disney's most visually stunning 2D animations ever, in large part thanks to Ron Clements and John Musker pushing the boundaries of what their human animation team could come up with. The film was made years before digital simulations could automatically recreate bubbles, and while animators would typically save themselves time by photocopying repetitive objects rather than drawing them all by hand, Clements and Musker insisted that every single one of these bubbles be drawn the hard way. As such, the poor animators had to draw more than 1 million bubbles for the film, and so intensive was the workload that Disney ended up farming most of the bubble drawings out to a China-based firm, Pacific Rim Productions. This ended up causing a massive complication due to a student protest which took place during production in Beijing, where Pacific Rim was based. The drawings were locked in the company's vault mere blocks away from where the most violent demonstrations and conflicts were taking place, and so there was a very real fear that the completed work, estimated to be roughly 1/3 of all the bubbles, could get lost due to fires, looting, or general destruction. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, but the filmmakers' insistence that every bubble be drawn by hand ultimately proved even more of a stressful ask than expected. Number 8. Drew Barrymore insisted the Angels couldn't use guns. Charlie's Angels. Drew Barrymore wasn't just one of the stars of 2000's big screen Charlie's Angels adaptation, she was also a producer and, better yet, was the entire reason the film got made in the first place, having purchased the big screen rights years prior. As a result, Barrymore had a tremendous amount of control over the film's creative direction, and her most prominent contribution was insisting that the Angels never fire guns. Though the villains throughout the film used firearms, Barrymore demanded that the Angels use no such weaponry, with them instead relying upon their martial arts skills and tech savvy. As for why Barrymore ruled the titular trio use no guns, well, co-producer Leonard Goldberg explained, "We talked about that and we thought that given the violence that's going on in our country, the villains have plenty of guns. They have big guns, small guns, rockets, helicopters, bombs, everything. But we thought, let the Angels show you that you can do it without guns." Considering that gun violence is still endemic in the US over 20 years later, it's a valid point. Though somewhat ironically, the 2019 reboot featured plenty of firearm use from the new Angels. Number 7. Lorraine had to be named after a producer's wife. Back to the Future. It's truly nothing short of a miracle that Back to the Future turned out as great as it did, given the many near-miss creative calls that almost resulted in the movie being quite different indeed. Eric Stoltz was originally cast as Marty McFly, and even filmed significant scenes before being replaced with the better-suited Michael J. Fox, and Universal executive Sidney Sheinberg even infamously suggested the film be renamed to Spaceman from Pluto. Though Steven Spielberg tactfully shot the idea down, Sheinberg was more steadfast about changing other naming conventions in the script, such as renaming Marty's mother from Meg to Lorraine in tribute to his wife Lorraine Gary. He also suggested renaming Professor Brown to Doc Brown, which he felt would more easily connect with audiences. While the latter suggestion actually made a measure of sense, the former is positively ego-driven, vanity-infused nonsense. To Sheinberg's credit, he was completely supportive of the decision to recast Marty with Fox, so we can't bash him too much, but even so, what a peculiar demand to make. Number 6. The main villain had to be male. Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 is one of the MCU's most divisive movies, if only for the fact that director Shane Black decided to bait and switch audiences expecting to see a more traditional rendition of the comic book supervillain, the Mandarin. Instead, the apparent Mandarin was a real paid stooge named Trevor Slattery, while the self-anointed real Mandarin was Aldrich Killian. But this wasn't always the plan, and earlier drafts of the script actually had Maya Hansen as the primary antagonist. Yet, as Black himself confirmed, a memo came down from the then Marvel CEO insisting that the main villain had to be a man, because boys don't buy toys of female antagonists apparently. In Black's own words, all I'll say is this: on the record, there was an early draft of Iron Man 3 where we had an inkling of a problem, which is that we had a female character who was the villain in the draft. We had finished the script and we were given a no-holds-barred memo saying that that cannot stand, and we've changed our minds because, after consulting, we've decided that toys won't sell as well if it's a female. So we had to change the entire script because of toy making. Now, Rebecca Hall, who was going to play the original villain, wasn't exactly thrilled, and thankfully in 2015, when Marvel shifted things around and Big Kev was given full creative control, we got more than a few quality female villains showing up since. Number 5. There had to be a kill every 8 minutes. The Signal. It goes without saying that young, hungry filmmakers have a lot less power at the bargaining table, that is, none at all, and so are generally far more agreeable to whatever changes a studio wants, as long as it means that they're allowed to make their damn movie. Case in point, we have 2007's The Signal, a low-budget horror film directed by independent filmmakers David Bruckner, Dan Bush, and Jacob Gentry. While promoting his horror film The Night House, Bruckner revealed that The Signal only ever got made because he agreed to one of the financier's very specific conditions regarding the movie's body count. He said, "There was a foreign distribution company who had given us a breakdown and said, we will guarantee the finance if you have a kill every 8 minutes. Granted, Bruckner and his fellow filmmakers clearly had grisly murder on the mind already while conceiving the film, but assuredly delivered above and beyond what the money men demanded. The Signal ended up grossing over $400,000 and boosted the careers of all 3 filmmakers, so this was most certainly a win-win for everyone." Number 4. The blood had to be unnaturally coloured. Evil Dead 2. Sam Raimi had quite the experience attempting to release his directorial debut The Evil Dead, particularly in the US, where it was given the dreaded X rating for its violent content, effectively lumping it in with the porn and more transgressive genre films. Despite The Evil Dead's commercial success, the X rating prevented it from being even more of a hit, and because the sequel was being distributed by DEG, who were signatories to the MPAA, Raimi was contractually obliged to deliver an R-rated cut of Evil Dead 2. But the producers had a novel suggestion to help Raimi avoid another X rating: use darker, more unnatural colours of blood throughout the film to make it seem less realistic and soften the impact of the gore. However, upon reviewing the final cut, DEG decided the film was still too violent to avoid an X without cutting massive portions out, and so made the drastic call to not submit it to the MPAA at all. Instead, they released Evil Dead 2 unrated through a shell company, and though the sequel turned a profit at the box office, the lack of an MPAA rating clearly impacted its ability to be booked theatrically, as it opened in just 310 cinemas on its opening weekend. Number 3. It had to be set in Alaska rather than Canada. The Grey. 2011's survival thriller The Grey is far more than just a Liam Neeson action flick. It's a surprisingly philosophical look at mortality and man versus nature. Now, the director originally wrote the chilly thriller to take place in the Yukon Territory, the least populated region of Canada, but this was promptly shut down by fellow producers who demanded that the script be rewritten to change the setting. The feeling was that Alaska would be a more relatable locale for American audiences and in turn heighten the film's commercial prospects, while the Canadian tundra was apparently too alienating for your average American to connect with. The director fought to keep the original Yukon setting, but he was clearly outnumbered here. Ridley Scott was amongst the film's producers, though it's never been clarified whether or not he made this suggestion to the team or not. Now, the spine story would have fundamentally been the same regardless of where it was set, but it just proves how cynically risk-averse your average Hollywood producer really is. Anything the audience might view as alien or other is a big no-no. And number 1, a subplot involving a mine had to be added. Enemy Mine. And yet, studio demands don't get much more ridiculous or inane than those made by the stuffed shirts overseeing Wolfgang Petersen's 1985 cult classic sci-fi film Enemy Mine. Enemy Mine starred Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. as a human and alien who became stranded on a hostile alien planet and must reluctantly join forces in order to ensure their mutual survival. It's a fun, if pretty flawed movie, with many complaining about the film's unnecessary inclusion of minor antagonists known as scavengers. Bafflingly, the miners weren't actually in the original script at all, but Fox executives felt that the title would confuse audiences if there wasn't, in fact, a mine with miners in it. If you've ever wanted a crystal clear window into how little studio exec think of you, the average moviegoer, here it is. They couldn't even believe that Middle America would understand the possessive syntax of the title. Good one.